Good morning everyone and welcome to our Parents to Be event online. I'm Sophie and I work in the marketing team here at Mums and Papas. We are absolutely over the moon to welcome you today to our online Parents to Be event, and we're going to be talking all about breastfeeding. So this week we've just had World Breastfeeding Week and we're here to share some great knowledge, expertise and wisdom from three fantastic speakers with you today. So we've still got some people joining in, so welcome on to the event. Our event's going to last for about an hour, so we're going to have our three speakers that are going to be chatting to you all about their experiences. And then we're going to have a live Q&A at the end. So if you've got any questions for myself or our speakers, you can use the chat button that's just at the bottom and start to ask your questions. We will then still collate all of those and then we'll ask our questions at the end of the event. So no question is too simple, no question is too small, and you can ask your question anonymously. So please feel completely comfortable to ask your questions to us and we will answer as many as we possibly can. Also, for your peace of mind, you can see and hear all of us, but we can't see and hear you. So you can just relax and enjoy the event. So first up, we welcome Chantel Champs.
Hello.
Chantel, hello. In fact, I should mention now, before we get too far in, that there's three of us, Fran, Chantel and myself, all definitely rocking the polka dot theme. And Cheryl is looking gorgeous in a lovely floral number. So I don't know how we all managed to do it, pick the exact same style, but it's definitely not a Mamas and Papas uniform.
Yeah.
So welcome, Chantel. So you are a mum to three daughters and you are author of the recently launched Milk Cup. Yeah, brand new. We are so excited. I cannot wait to talk to you about this today. This is going to be amazing. But you are a staunch supporter of parents feeding their baby however they feel is best. So you're here to talk to us about your journey, offer some advice for parents wanting to breastfeed as well. So tell me about being a mum to three daughters, feeding them all as well.
I know. So yeah, I'm a mum. I'm 31, had to think about that there. So I've got a 6-year-old and twins that are nearly 3. I'm going to probably speak more about my twin breastfeeding journey because there was just so much I was up against with that. But also will tie in with my eldest. So basically, I breastfed my eldest. I never really done a lot of research. Like I had no idea that, it could hurt. But that turned out I was just positioning her wrong. I had mastitis. I had no idea. I was like, why am I so ill? I was really ill from it and no one told me anything. And then I wanted to get to 6 weeks because I just thought that's kind of like how long people breastfed for. I had no one breastfeeding around me. I was the only person out of my friendship circle. Well, not many of my friends had children, but the ones that did or who I knew of, I was the only one breastfeeding. So once I got to like 6 weeks, I thought I'm really enjoying this actually. Like maybe I'll just go to 6 months. And then we got to 6 months and then everyone kind of starts asking, when you're going to give up? Like, come on, you're at 6 months now. And I was thinking, I'm really enjoying this though. My eldest is enjoying it. She wasn't my eldest then. She was a baby. She was 6 months. She was enjoying it. So, I was literally met with so much criticism. I literally cannot explain to you how much criticism from people that cared about me. It wasn't in a horrible way. It was probably more like in a lack of knowledge way. So I got to 6 months and I felt like I had to kind of have an excuse why I wanted to continue. So then we made it to a year. Then I got to a year and I was feeling like I felt a bit abnormal and I felt like I really still want to do this though. So we carried on and we ended up finishing at 19 months. The moment I stopped, I missed it so much, but I knew that we would have more children. So I just literally couldn't wait to have more children purely to breastfeed. And then I found out I was having twins and literally I cried, probably swore. And the first sentence I said was, I'm not going to be able to breastfeed. And I started crying and I was like so upset. And I went around and told all my family that I was having twins. And they was all of them said, oh no, you're not going to breastfeed, you're going to have boobs down by your ankles, which by the way, they're not. But I was met with so much criticism for wanting to breastfeed. And I felt like I couldn't breastfeed twins. I felt like I didn't know it. One, I didn't know it was possible. And two, I just felt like I would feel like a bit of a freak because I just didn't know it was a thing you could do. And then I'd done loads of research because I really had this overwhelming feeling like I wanted to breastfeed. I breastfed Dakota and loved it. And I felt like, I've got 2 boobs, 2 arms, like I'm going to do this. Oh my God, it makes me feel emotional just saying it because I was just so determined. And you know, I had rows with family members. I'm not even joking. I actually had family members shouting at me on the phone. Someone who's not even a mother, and she wasn't a mum, and she didn't have children. She was shouting at me for my choice for my children, and it absolutely infuriated me. So done loads of research, and I found a breastfeeding Facebook group called Twins and Triplets, for twins and triplets. And there was like triplet mums on there exclusively breastfeeding for like a year. And I was thinking, you know, they don't have free boobs and free arms. So if they can do it, like I can do it. So I told literally everyone I met at the hospital, I was like, yep, I'm going to breastfeed. Behind closed doors, I was a little bit like, I'd make excuses to people because I felt really embarrassed about wanting to breastfeed twins. So I'd be like, oh yeah, you know, I might give it a go. And I really played it down. But inside, like I had this burning fire, like, no, I'm going to give this a go. I didn't buy any bottles, didn't buy any formula as backup. I was like, right, I'm going for it. If it doesn't work, you know, you can get anything next day. And that's something I would advise to people as well. Like, just give it your all. Don't have that backup there. And then if you need it, you can get it straight away. So, because I thought if I had it there, I could probably cave easier. So I told everyone, my midwife. Then once I had them, they was 5 weeks early. They had like low blood sugar. And I just had a massive lack of support from the midwives. And I feel like this is something that seems to be an overriding thing when people message me on my Instagram page. There is such a lack of support, and it literally makes me so upset because, I mean, I ended up breastfeeding the twins for 2.5 years, but I'm still mentally affected by the lack of support and discouragement I had from the health professionals. And I sometimes feel really stupid for saying that because I had ended up being a very successful journey, but it doesn't take away the fact of the lack of support I had in the hospital. The breastfeeding team wasn't there, and it was just very, very hard. And I feel like going into any breastfeeding journey, I think you kind of have to take that into your own hands because you don't know what the ward's like, you don't know if the breastfeeding team are on. And yeah, I just feel like it's just such a massive thing. Like, knowledge is power. You know, if we was going to do any form of journey, we would, you know, anything, like I always say, like, breastfeeding's like climbing a mountain. So obviously if you was going to climb a mountain, you wouldn't just be like, I'm going to go climb a mountain and then just go. You would like research like the best way to do it. And then, you know, you'd know, say that they'd say, oh, once you get to this part, you know, you might get these problems, but this is how you get over them. So that's how I see like breastfeeding. You know, I didn't know that you could get mastitis and how to prevent it, how to help it. You know, all these things I feel like you need to kind of prepare for, to know if something does happen, it doesn't mean that that's the end of your journey. Like, you can if you know what to do, one, that's great, and two, if you don't, like, hopefully, like I say to everyone, like, research your like local lactation consultants. Hopefully you won't need them, but if you do, at least before you do get to that point where, because so many women do, proper go off and like all these different ways to go off. I feel like when you get to like 6 weeks, there's like the cluster feedings, they go through a growth spurt. And this seems to be the overriding week when so many women say, I had to stop, and they're so upset about it. And it literally makes me so sad. I've cried so many times when I've had messages from women because I'm just like, no, like, I just wish they'd have seen someone. My biggest advice to anyone who's watching this, learn about cluster feeding, do as much research as possible. I cannot express to you how crucial it is to do your research. Don't let anyone sway your decision. You know, obviously taking advice from people that know what they're talking about, but ultimately you're their mum. I had people saying to me, no one can help with the twins if you're breastfeeding, but you know, half an hour visit once a week was never going to help me with my feeding journey. You know, and through the night, like, my husband was working, these people aren't going to be there. So although it comes from a well-meaning place, you have to take that into your own hands, I think.
Well, sometimes people have opinions when they're not always welcomed, are they? I mean, it's different asking for an opinion to, you know, somebody providing their opinion. It's hard sometimes.
Sorry, I have a twin at the door. One second, I should quickly check with my husband. Yeah, so there's cluster feeding. Oh, 1 second, sorry.
She's saying here, look, I'm here. She's she wants to come and say hello. She's not shy. I like it.
She's actually really not. She's probably naked, otherwise I would let her in. Yeah, so at the 6 weeks there's a cluster feeding stage, and it can be relentless. In my head, I knew it was coming, and it lasts for like 3 to 5 days. And sorry, she's so off.
No, don't worry. Listen, for anybody new to it that's not breastfed before, or if you're expecting your baby and you'd like to breastfeed, cluster feeding is basically where a baby wants to feed continuously for, you know, a continuous period of time. They're very hungry and they're wanting to stock up. Is that right? The right thing?
Yeah. So if they're going to go through a growth spurt, it's like preparing your body so you do have enough milk before it happens. But it's a very normal thing, and it's something that's sorry.
Don't worry.
Sorry, I'll be 1 second. Sorry.
Don't worry. This is exactly why we can say it's live. We are here to chat to you all in a very natural way. And this is it. When you're a parent, you are never really on your own. And
sorry,
anybody that anybody that wants to go to the toilet on their own will realise that when they have a 5-year-old like I do that definitely wants to be with you all the time. So don't worry. Please don't worry, Chantel.
Yeah, so in my head anyway, I had these, like, you know, the cluster feeding stage lasts like 3 to 5 days max, and I kept telling myself today might be my worst day, but tomorrow could be my best day. And that's something I constantly rammed into my head, and I feel like I needed it with the girls because it was so relentless, and I was thinking, this is not possible, I've just fed them, how can I feed them again? And I feel like this seems to be a massive point when so many women just end up stopping, but it's literally such a small time. And my biggest advice I could say to anyone is, obviously, you know, everyone has backup. I know so many women that get backup, they put their money into formula, bottles, sterilizer, so it's there as a just in case. But what I would advise is keep that money, have it to one side. If you do decide to do that, then that's honestly, it's so important for you to do what you want to do. But if you don't feel ready for that, then put your money into paying privately for a lactation consultant, so that money you've saved. And they are just so amazing. And I feel like if you can see a lactation consultant, some of them do Zoom as well. I feel like it could just be the make or break. There's also like the National Breastfeeding Helpline, and I just think if you are struggling but you don't want to stop, then please speak to someone, reach out to someone. And I just feel like it could just make or break your journey. If you don't have the right knowledge or support, they're just two of the biggest things.
Yes, I think you're totally right. I think sometimes a lot of people, you know, I've had it with my friends, you know, some people have had really amazing experiences because the healthcare professionals that do work in the NHS, you know, they're so passionate about breastfeeding and want to support, but, you know, everywhere's slightly different. Not, you know, we can't have consistency everywhere right now, especially in this sort of time with COVID. People have got staff restrictions, so it must be very difficult. But the fact that there is that support out there that you can access if, you know, you feed your baby how you want to feed your baby, but if you are passionate about wanting to breastfeed and you want to stick with it, there are places where you can get that support to give you that advice and guidance so you can carry on doing it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, I feel like so many people don't know about that. Like when I was in the hospital, like I had the pediatric with the twins, because they was twins, everyone was like, you can't feed twins, maybe you'll combi feed. But I was so determined, and I know women can do it, and I thought there's no difference why I can't do it. I've got the determination, you know, I have the milk there. And I kind of fought the health professionals, and I know I'm so lucky that I had that confidence because I'd done the research before. And I think if you don't go into that, then I know that I probably wouldn't be breastfeeding now, because you kind of listen, and obviously they, you know, you can take their advice on it. It's so important to listen to the advice you're given from health professionals, but you're still allowed to choose how you want to feed your baby. And we ended up doing formula top-ups for the twins because they had low blood sugars, and they wanted to just do the formula top-ups, but I still wanted to breastfeed. So I said, no, like, I want to breastfeed, I'm going to put them on my boob first. My body needs to know that it needs to produce milk, and then our express, so we top up with the express milk, I'll feed first, and then anything extra is topped up with formula. And I said I wanted to have it for a feeding tube because I didn't want to do the bottle feeding and then get confused. But obviously, if I hadn't of research, we would have just done the formula top up straight away. Then I wouldn't have been breastfeeding the girls, so they would never have had those signals my body wouldn't have had those signals to produce the milk. And I just feel like that's, you know, you have to have confidence in yourself and your ability. And if you've got the support, the knowledge, you're halfway there. Like there's a saying that breastfeeding is 90% determination and 10% milk, and I really believe in that. I feel like, I don't want to plug my book at all, but in my book I write about my breastfeeding story with the twins, and I feel like you can read that, and I feel like that's just kind of backs up that statement, because it literally was so much determination. And if it wasn't for that and the knowledge, then like I said, I wouldn't have breastfed them. And I know that I would have been really affected by that, because I was affected just from the fight I had to breastfeed at the beginning.
Well, I think you're totally right. And, you know, please do plug your book, because we want to know more about it. So tell me a little bit more about Milk It. So it launched in July, so it's only just come out.
Literally like 2 weeks ago. It's just basically, I like have the biggest passion to want to help women to breastfeed. So even like, say someone said to me, oh, I bought your book, I'm like, I don't want people to think they've got to buy my book. Like I have so much like passion when women DM me. I like absolutely love it. So I feel like everything I would say to a friend is basically in the book. Like I talk about when you have sex and you're breastfeeding, like not at the same time, but, you know, just things that I've never known people to talk about, you know, just how your body changes, my mental health after the girls. It's very personal. I was very mentally ill after having the twins. There's so many different factors into that, one of them being the fight at the hospital, but there's so many other things as well. And it's basically just literally everything I've learned about breastfeeding, all the best tips, but also with my story, because I didn't want it to be, you know, like I've read so many books and it's so overwhelming with like science, and it's really official with all these big words, and I'm reading it like, oh, I'm just like a normal person and I don't really understand what they're saying. So I wanted it to be literally written like I'm speaking to someone. And I get literally so many DMs a day. I cry every single time, and they all just say, oh my God, like that's a book that I needed. And I, you know, like when I wrote it, like I was like, you have no idea how someone else is going to take it, because when I've read it back myself, I'm reading it and I'm critiquing everything, like, oh, that sentence should have been different. But the feedback I've had from so many people, like that, people that weren't following me neither, they just bought the book because someone had recommended it. The feedback is exactly how I wanted it to be, like friend to friend, really like informal. Like I said, you know, I talk about stretch marks in my bum crack after being pregnant. I didn't even know you could get them there. I just wanted it to be literally, like I said, I'm like such an open book, and that's exactly what it is, like friend to friend, and yeah, no judgment at all. I'm like I said, none of my friends have ever breastfed, and I'm such a supporter of them. I think it's so important for women to feed how they want to feed, so it's not judgmental in any way at all.
You saying it's an open book, it literally is an open book, and you are. And you know, I'm really grateful for you to be on here today, because that's really lovely that you've been on here to share your journey. So thank you so much, Chantal.
Thank you so much for having me.
And now I'd love to welcome Cheryl. So Cheryl Samuels, you may know as the Holistic Midwife. She's a little bit famous on our social channels, as is Fran, because they've both featured on there to do takeovers before. But Cheryl is an NHS midwife, a digital lead for All for Birth, and a mum to 4. And Cheryl's aim is to create a supportive community for pregnancy, birth, baby and postnatal, to teach, learn, empower and inspire. So you're here today, Cheryl, to share some tips, aren't you, on breastfeeding, how to get it off to a good start, some positions, some attachment, and talking about feeding cues. So welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I was saying earlier, I was just, all my children are teenagers now, so they were only just getting out of bed when we started this. So I remember when mine were little, Chantal were knocking at the door, don't give you 2 minutes peace. But yeah, so I'm a community midwife. I'm just about to go into a continuity team where I follow the women, so from booking, antenatal care, intrapartum care, so when you're in labour, and postnatal visits, which is going to be absolutely fantastic. And I would definitely recommend for anyone who's watching to ask your NHS Trust if there is a continuity or a case loading team available to you. But education is so important, and like you were saying, Chantal, knowledge really is power, and it's so important to get educated around how to feed your baby beforehand, so that, you know, when you've got your actual baby in your arms, you're not feeling so overwhelmed. But what I wanted to talk to you first about is something called skin to skin, and this can be done however you're choosing to feed your baby. I'm going to try and get in the frame so I've got my doll, but literally, and it doesn't matter how you have your baby, so whether you have a vaginal delivery or a cesarean section or an assisted birth, we're still going to really try and facilitate skin to skin for you. And it literally means skin, so the baby is obviously naked and onto your skin, which is really important. So no bra, nothing there, you know, and at this point you'd still be having the placenta, if it's a vaginal birth, you know, attached to you. And it's really important that you have that kind of bonding time, all being well with you, all being well with baby. And if you do need any medical assistance, we'll obviously facilitate this time as soon as possible afterwards. So ideally, we recommend for you to have at least an hour skin to skin with baby after birth. Even if you're in theatre and say baby does need to be taken to resuscitate very quickly, we can still facilitate skin to skin in the theatre. And it's really important that you let your birth partner and your midwife know that they're your wishes, and we can advocate for you at the time. And why skin to skin so important is because it has a massive physiological you know, process and benefits for mum and for baby. So for baby, it regulates their heart rate and their breathing and their temperature. It can even help to regulate their blood sugar levels, and it really helps with the bonding process. So when you've got your baby skin to skin, you're going to start producing lots of this hormone called oxytocin, which is a fascinating hormone. You probably hear about it in your classes to do with contraction surges with your uterus, but it also is responsible for your milk being ejected and your letdown reflex. So it's basically a hormone that squeezes cells. So anything to do with ejection, you know, is what oxytocin is responsible for. So we'll obviously want to, it's also called the love hormone. So you can obviously imagine having the cuddles, those first cuddles with your baby are absolutely amazing. So it's going to flood you with all of this oxytocin and really help that kind of colostrum, which is your first kind of milk, which has got loads of antibodies in, you know, come down for that feed. So skin to skin, no matter how you're feeding baby, is really, really important. And it also helps to contract your uterus afterwards, which I was saying during labour, it helps to, you know, contract your uterus so that you're dilating and you're giving birth. But afterwards, where your placenta is still inside your uterus, where you have that skin to skin and your uterus still contracted with the oxytocin, it will help to deliver your placenta as well, help minimise any bleeding after birth. So it's really important to try and get that skin to skin if possible. What I wanted, if you've got any questions about any of this, you can pop them on, we can answer them afterwards. And then what I wanted to talk to you about was feeding cues. So I think a lot of parents think, you know, if your baby cries, it's hungry, or, you know, if your baby cries, you're going to go through the process of, do they need their nappy changing? Are they hungry? Actually, there is so many feeding cues before crying. You know, crying really is the last sign of hunger. So what your baby will do is begin to stir. So just kind of like slight movements, they'll start opening their mouth, they'll start turning their head from side to side, they'll start rooting. As they get a little bit more agitated, you'll get a bit more exaggerated movement, and they'll start kind of putting their fists in their mouth or trying to latch onto anything near them. I'm sure you probably had your baby trying to latch onto your nose or your chin or your shoulder. And basically crying is the last sign of hunger, and they will get, obviously, you know, can get quite you know, red face, they'll be crying, agitated body movements. And if you kind of miss those early feeding cues, skin to skin can be a really beneficial way to try and relax them and calm them down, like we're saying, you know, stabilize that heart rate and make them feel a bit calmer. But talking to your baby, stroking your baby, cuddling, skin to skin is all going to get them back up to those early feeding cues. And you'll get to know your baby. Every baby is different. Some babies will take, you know, 5-10 minutes to get from early cues to late cues. Other babies are like 0 to 60 miles per hour and literally, you know, will start crying really, really quickly. And that's their individual personality. So don't feel like you're missing the early feeding cues if your baby zooms to crying straight away. But trying to get your baby attached to the breast, especially in the early days where you're both learning. You know, baby, I always say it's like learning to drive a car for you and for baby. Baby comes out, it is, most people think it's going to be a natural thing where they're just naturally going to be able to do it, and baby knows what they're doing. But actually, it, with every time that you do it, it's like a driving lesson, you know, and you'll get better and better and better. And it's really, really important just to oh, I lost what I'm saying now. But yeah, to kind of learn your individual baby as well. So, you know, those feeding cues will be completely different. But what you want to do with positioning and attachment, which is what I wanted to talk to you about next, is there are. I'm hoping you can see my doll. I've got my doll here. I'm going to take the placenta off.
Yes, we
Now,
can see your
just,
baby. Does this baby have a name, your baby doll?
It doesn't. Everyone.
Is that baby Annabelle?
No, it is an actual.
Oh, it does. It looks
like
baby Annabelle.
One, yeah.
Right, listen, answers on a postcard for anybody wanting to name Cheryl's baby doll. Yeah. Maybe we call it Mama's or Papa's, one of those, hint, hint.
I know, that's terrible, isn't it? I always get asked that as well. So with your positioning and attachment, so it is going to be a learning process for you and for baby, you know, especially the first few early days. And there are different positions to try, and I really recommend that you try all of them and that you experiment, you know, what's going to be right for your friend or someone that you know is going to be different for you and baby. And with each baby, you know, I don't know, Chantel and Fran, I've got 4 children, but each baby will have their own individual, you know, preferences and what they like. So what you can do initially, and I think this is quite good if you've had a cesarean section, or you are, you know, find it more comfortable initially, is kind of laid back attachment, which is basically where you are usually kind of up in bed. You can have the back of the bed up and you just let baby kind of rest on you, and that's kind of called a laid back position. You can do side lying, which is absolutely fantastic. I can't demonstrate that with you, but you'd obviously be laying on your side on your bed. And this is absolutely, if you can crack this for nighttime feeding, it makes it so much more enjoyable and comfortable and relaxing for you both. And you literally, I'm going to go through kind of how to attach baby in a minute. So you go through the same process, you know, whatever position you choose basically. So side lying, you've got football hold or rugby hold, which is basically where you tuck baby under here and you attach them. So that can be a fantastic position if you are struggling to get a good deep latch. Can
I just add as well, for twins, yes. I feel like that's how I've fed the twins, because there's 2 of them, they kind of like weren't crossing over.
Absolutely. And I think it's really worth getting one of those feeding pillows. I found it invaluable, you know, like a sausage type pillow, but obviously you can use your pillows from your sofa if you've got loads of pillows. And then the most common one that you probably see in pictures and things is a cradle hold. And you've got the cross cradle, which what you want to do is support baby's back on your forearm, and you hold baby on their neck, so not on their head. So you want them to be able to move their heads back and forth and position themselves comfortably. And then I'm going to talk you through how to position. So what you always want baby to be is close to you, and you always want their head and body to be in line, because actually if you turn your head to the side and swallow, it's really uncomfortable, and you want the baby to be in a nice sustainable position. So you've got to think of your comfort and you've got to think of baby's comfort. So you want their head and body in line, nice and close to you. So this is called the CHINS acronym. So I'll go through it with you. So C for CHINS is close to you. Head, H for head is head and body. Head free, sorry, and in line, head and body in line. And then what we want is nose to nipple. So when you're latching baby, you always want to kind of put baby's nose opposite your nipple. So most people kind of think you're just going to put them on like this. Actually, this is where most people do the most learning, I think, is positioning and attachment, and the most practice. So like I was saying, with every lesson, with every feed, you're going to get better and better. So you always want to bring baby on asymmetrically. So if you think baby's nice and close to you, you can see that baby's head is a bit further away from the breast, and the chin is going to hit the breast first. So that is really important. So nose opposite nipple, and the chin is going to hit the breast first. Now what you can do is express a few drops of colostrum onto the top lip, or you're just basically going to wait for a big wide open mouth, because you want your nipple to reach their soft palate. If you run your tongue on the top of your mouth, you're going to have a hard palate, and then it gets to a softer area, and you want your nipple to reach all the way back to that softer area. So that's quite a big mouthful of breast that they've got to get for it to be comfortable for you and not to get any nipple trauma. So you want to asymmetric latch, so chin's going to come in first, nose opposite nipple, big wide open mouth, and then you're going to make sure that they get a big mouthful of breast there. And you want a nice gap under the nose. You want to see a nice bit of areola, so the darker part of your nipple. You want to visualize that on top there. You're also going to want to see nice big full cheeks on baby. You want to see their lips kind of like flanged out, so the Mick Jagger pose like that, so that you know that they've got a really big wide open mouth. You don't want to hear any clicking noises, so like that, because if they've got a really big full mouthful of breast, then you won't hear any noises. And when after a feed, you don't want your nipple to be in any different shape. So if your nipple's got right to the back of their throat where that soft palate is, it should be the same shape afterwards. Now, comfort for you, for that first 10 seconds while baby gets latched on, it is a bit eye-watering, a bit toe-curling, because obviously you've got lots of nerve endings there. So, you know, it is, I wouldn't say breastfeeding is pain-free. In the early days, it's a case of getting used to it, you know, the skin around your nipples toughening up a little bit. It should not be painful throughout the whole feed, and that is really a red flag that you've got baby attached, you know, slightly incorrectly, and you may just need some mould adjustments. So always ask your midwife to come and assess you, or if you're on the wards, like Chantel was saying, if it's an infant feeding specialist midwife to come and assess you. I know, Fran, you're going to talk about some kind of problems that might arise, so I won't go into that too much. And also with the CHINS acronym, we want it to be sustainable for you. So like I was saying, with that nice feeding pillow, and you want baby to be in a comfortable position, you know, make sure you're comfortable, because if you're hunched over like this for, you know, babies can feed anywhere between 5 to 50 minutes, and that's quite a long time if they're having a 3-course dinner. So we say feed baby responsibly. You know, they will feed probably at least 4 times in the first 24 hours, but after that we're expecting a good at least 8 to 12 feeds in a 24-hour period, could be more, anywhere between 5 and 50 minutes. And it is their comfort, it's their drink, it's their snack, it's their breakfast, their lunch and their dinner. So you're going to have all different amounts of feeds, no kind of set time in between the feeds either. So, you know, like Chantel was saying, when you're having the cluster feeds, or they're going through a growth spurt, you know, they may well be showing you those early feeding cues 20 minutes after the last feed, and it's really important that you follow your baby's lead, really. So that's what we call responsive feeding. So yeah, I think I've gone through everything I wanted to say. Skin to skin feeding cues.
I needed you, Cheryl, just as I was about to do it. I was really, really lucky. I had an amazing midwife in hospital that got my feeding journey off to the best start I could have had. And I think sometimes when you were saying about positioning and comfort, sometimes the positions that you don't think are going to be the most comfortable are, and I'd had an emergency C-section where I was under a general anaesthetic, but as soon as I woke up from my anaesthetic, they asked me, would you like to you know, you hoping to breastfeed? I said yes. They popped him straight on my skin. I had that moment with him, and then my husband was able to then enjoy that skin to skin connection as well. I then could practice my feeding, you know, what was most comfortable. And actually, I think I'm a short person, I have a short torso. The rugby ball was really comfortable for me, and he was a big baby, so I was sort of like stretching my arms around, but it still felt the right thing. It kind of looked the most unnatural feeding position, but it was the most comfortable for me. So thank you for sharing those options. I think that'll be really useful for anybody that's sort of thinking, we feed a baby like this, when actually there's lots of options available to make it comfortable for you.
Yeah, give it a go. Absolutely. Experiment, try them all and find out what's best for you and your baby.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, Cheryl. And we'll come back to you at the end, because I think we've got some questions that'll link nicely to what you've talked about, which is great. So now I would like to welcome, last but certainly by no means least, our lovely Fran from NCT. And Fran is an NCT breastfeeding counsellor and postnatal practitioner. So Fran, you're going to talk through some common questions and struggles around breastfeeding, because it's not an easy journey, is it? There's ups and downs in this roller coaster ride of feeding. So can you have a chat through some of the common problems that people might find?
Yes, absolutely. So good morning, everybody. So I'm mum of 4. I've got 4 children, also like Cheryl, now in their teens. Well, my baby is 10, so not really a baby anymore. and breastfed all of them for different amounts of time. And, you know, sometimes it goes really well and you feel like everything's really positive, like Chantel was talking about earlier. And sometimes you hit some real challenges. And that's what I experienced as a mum. And that's certainly what I hear from the parents that I support now. So some women find breastfeeding really easy. They take to it like a duck to water. It's very instinctive for them. It's very instinctive for babies. But actually, for the vast majority of women, it's much more tricky. And just as Cheryl was mentioning, we describe it so much as a learnt skill. So although all of those instincts and reflexes for feeding are really instinctive for your baby, they might not necessarily feel as instinctive for you as mum. So what are the sorts of challenges that people get in touch with us at NCT and all healthcare providers really about early feeding? And I think essentially the first thing is just what Cheryl was talking about actually, and about how comfortable feeding is. So lots of you might have already heard people talking to you about sore nipples or bleeding nipples or feeding being really uncomfortable. And essentially that is all to do with the position you're holding your baby in while you're feeding them. And if your baby has got a really good mouthful of breast tissue, so it's very much breastfeeding and not nipple feeding, then that should eventually feel quite comfortable. As Cheryl was mentioning, you would expect there to be 10 or 20 seconds of it being a little not very comfortable to start with, and that's what lots of parents experience, lots of mums experience, but it should ease, and that should ease. If that carries on throughout a feed, that probably isn't as, you know, that isn't an attachment that you're looking for, and it might be worth popping the finger in the corner of your baby's mouth, breaking their suction, and then trying again so that you don't get some of that damage. Because actually sometimes a really sore nipple is just caused by one feed not going as well as it might have done, and if you can catch that quickly and sort it out, it can make the world of difference. Sometimes some of the pain related to feeding is something else. It might be something like tongue tie, where the frenulum, so the bit of skin, I was going to stick my tongue out at you all then, I better do that. So the bit of skin between the bottom of the tongue and the bottom of the mouth is more pronounced in some babies than in others. And what it means is that they haven't got the tongue movement that they need to be able to have a really good mouthful of breast tissue and hold on to it. And that's something your midwife will be able to check for you in those really early days. So sometimes pain in the nipple is to do with that, because babies keep slipping off. Sometimes it's something to do with something like thrush, which although not hugely common, is really annoying for women in the early days, because it passes, Chantel's nodding at me there, so it passes from mum to baby, and then baby back to mum, and then mum back to baby. And so that's something that you really need some support from probably from your GP from that. So that pain in the breast is probably the first reason people get in touch with me. Other things that people commonly ask about are things like, is my baby getting enough milk? How do I know if my baby's going to get enough milk? I feel like I've got hardly any milk at all, or I feel like I've got oodles of milk. And that can feel quite difficult to sort of work out what the body's up to. Now, essentially, breastfeeding works on a supply and demand basis. So the more milk that is pulled off a woman's breast, so whether that's her baby, whether it's her hand, whether it's her breast pump, the more milk will be produced in that mother's breast. So for women in the early days who feel like they maybe haven't got enough milk for their baby, might want to be making sure that they're feeding really, really regularly, or expressing a few times, just to try and encourage that milk supply. But you don't necessarily know exactly what your baby is getting. So how are you going to know what your baby is getting? So you're going to be looking for three things. So essentially, you're going to be looking at your baby's nappies. And your baby's nappies will be a really key indicator of how well your baby is doing. And you will never be as interested in another person's bowel habits as you are in your baby's.
I've got a nice knitted nappy there for
Oh,
you.
look at that.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, that's really cool.
Although I have to say, your baby's nappies will look a lot grosser than that. So you start off with that black one at the very top is what we would call meconium. So the very first poo that your baby produces in that first day after they've born, it's a bit like tar or Marmite mixed together. It's a bit gross.
Nice.
Really. Yeah, do you remember it? And you're
Yeah.
like trying to scrape it off your baby's bottom, really tough. And then over the next couple of days, what happens is it changes. It becomes, well, I describe it a little bit brown or a little bit green. It starts to go a little bit like pesto. Sorry for the culinary.
You put me off
No,
pesto for life.
everybody that was having pesto for lunch says,
Yeah.
oh, I'm not a fan of pesto, and I'm not a fan of Marmite today either.
So it turns like that, and then once milk's in properly, it ends up, well, again, a culinary reference, it's a little bit like a cottage cheese consistency, but a chicken korma colour. So that's sort of,
Korma's
really
out
sorry. And if you're seeing that in your baby's nappy, that is a really good indicator that they're getting enough milk, because if they didn't have enough going in, they wouldn't have enough coming out either. So you'd expect to see about 8 to 10 wet nappies and a couple of poos a day at least. So that's one way of knowing if your baby's getting enough milk. The other ones are to do with weight loss and gain. So really normal in those early days of having your new baby that they will have lost some weight. So most babies lose between 5 and 7% of their birth weight in the first couple of days, and babies can lose up to 10% without anybody worrying at all about that.
One of my twins did. She
Yeah.
got 10.1, but they monitored, and then after that she was a 5. But she went down to like £3.6. She was so small, but yeah, we got to 10.1. But the other twin didn't.
Absolutely, and it can make a huge difference if they've just had a poo just before they they're just so tiny. So they will, your health provider, your midwife will be encouraging you and supporting you throughout that. So it might be about increasing the amount of feeds you need to give your baby, or it might be expressing a little bit and offering that as well. But you'll be given lots of support if your baby loses a bit too much weight. The other thing to look for is their behaviour. So you'd expect to be feeding, well, anywhere between 8 to 12, maybe even more feeds in 24 hours, but your baby would be able to wake themselves up to feed as well. So you'd be able to see pictures of your baby, or you'd be able to see your baby's behaviour. You know, they'd have periods of awakeness, they'd have periods of alertness, and they'd also have periods of being asleep. So you'd see that normal newborn behaviour. It's also, and Chantal mentioned this earlier about cluster feeding, it's also really normal in the early weeks to experience that cluster feeding, and most frequently of an evening. So where babies, you just want to sit down, you want to chill out, you've had a busy day, maybe your partner's come home from work, and what does your baby do? They just want to feed and feed and feed and feed and feed and feed, and that can be really wearing, but it's really normal newborn behaviour.
I think it's quite hard when that happens, in case there's any second time mums watching this, because it's normally around when you're cooking tea for your first one, isn't it? And it can just be so stressful. So I would say, while you are trying to establish your breastfeeding, have some, you know, like bolognese, some easy, quick things that you can cook for tea. And just all you've got to do is boil the rice or the pasta or something really simple like that for your toddler, you know, especially when you, sorry to interrupt you, but I just found that really stressful. It was always around 5 o'clock. You know, meal times, bath times was always quite stressful. So anything you can do to try and help with that, you know, make your life as easy as possible.
Absolutely. I think I resorted to bowls of cereal quite often.
Toast.
Is that confessing to terrible parenting?
Beans on toast, anything. But
needs must. It's literally just to get you to the end of the day, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the best tips, when I had the twins, we had a twin specialist midwife, and she, even, I don't think I'd left the ward, I hadn't left the ward, it's probably like my first day postnatal, she said, buy yourself a slow cooker. And I was like, what on earth is she on about? Because I already had a 2-year-old and then I had the twins, and I was thinking, but actually it was probably one of the best pieces of advice I had for getting through the early days with twins and a toddler was trying to organise your dinner in the morning when it's a bit calmer, and so it's just ready for you at tea time.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me skittle back. Ages ago I mentioned about milk supply and about how breastfeeding works on supply and demand. And I want to just pick up something that Cheryl said earlier about responsive feeding and how very, very important that is in those early days, because responding to your baby's needs means that if you're not producing quite enough milk to start with, or if you're producing way more than your baby's needs, if you respond to your baby and feed your baby when it shows you those cues, which, if you can remember, were that sort of wriggling, those sorts of chewing on your fist, just smacking your lips together, if you can respond to those, then breastfeeding will start to balance out and will follow the needs of your baby, rather than perhaps overproducing or not quite producing enough. The other thing I just wanted to mention, which is something that comes up quite a lot in the early days, is about engorgement. And basically that's really, really normal in the first few days of having a baby, but also when feeding patterns change. So normal in the early, and when I say engorgement, I basically mean that breasts have become really full and really tight, full of milk. And it can feel uncomfortable for women. They feel quite sore and swollen and hot, but also tricky for babies because the skin is really, really swollen and they can't get a good mouthful of breast tissue. And what it happens because that colostrum is changing into milk as we know it. So women start producing colostrum, so that's that first milk that babies get from about 16 weeks of pregnancy. And then when women give birth to the placenta, which Cheryl just showed you a moment ago, that kick-starts this hormonal reaction in women's bodies that changes milk from colostrum to milk as we understand it. So on day 3 or 4, women wake up and they go, my goodness me, I'm Dolly Parton. Their breasts are full and swollen, but babies really struggle because they can't get hold of a really good mouthful of breast tissue. So what you can do to help that is cold flannels, so really to cool breasts down in between feeds, expressing a little bit of milk off the breasts to just get a little bit of softness into the tissue. Cheryl, actually, can you hold your knitted boob up again?
Knitted boob, yeah.
Yeah, so and if you can do a C shape around, just to demonstrate hand expressing, and then you just squeeze. I'm going to let Cheryl demonstrate that for you. And just squeeze.
So you basically you can massage the breast first. You put your thumb and your forefinger a couple of centimeters either side of your nipple, and then you're going to push back. So when you push back, some people will feel a change in texture, so it'll feel like a grapey like texture. Some people don't, so you just want to push back about two centimeters, and then you're going to squeeze together, and you'll see multiple droplets come out onto your nipple, and then you're going to relax, squeeze back, together, relax, squeeze back, together, relax. As the drops stop coming, you're just going to turn round your breast like the hours of a clock, like that.
Perfect, thank you, Cheryl. And yeah, you're not expecting the milk to come out one hole, it's going to come out lots of holes. It's like a shower hose. It's sometimes like a shower hose with line scale in different directions as well. And you don't really need to take very much milk off before it's soft enough for your baby to have a little bit of a feed. If you have got any issues at all in the early days of feeding, I would, just like Chantel has said, just like Cheryl has said, I would encourage you to get support really, really early. It's much better to get support on day 2 than to wait till day 12 and everybody in the house is crying. And you can get support from your health professional, you can get support from infant feeding teams in hospital, you can get support from voluntary agencies like ourselves. So we've got infant feeding helpline, which is open from 8 in the morning till midnight, 365 days a year, and all the details for that are on our website. But really, really important to get skilled help early, and I cannot stress that highly enough.
Definitely.
Well, thank you,
I'll just add there as well, when you see your midwife, so we would normally do a visit the day after you go home, and then depending on your NH trust, it might vary slightly. So some trusts do a visit on day 3, some do a phone call, and then we always do a visit on day 5 and day 10. So they're the mandatory basic visits. But we have, definitely do individualised care plans. And if we saw you the day after you went home and you needed that extra feeding support, we can come to you daily if needed, and we can get our maternity care assistants to come into you as well. So if it is just the feeding support that you need, they are obviously trained breastfeeding support workers, and they can come into you daily if needed. So don't ever be afraid to ask for that help. Otherwise you will just be put on the standard protocol visits. But if you need that extra support, please call your community midwives or let them know when we come and see you, and we can give you that more kind of individualised care plan.
I think that's amazing.
I would always say ask, keep asking.
Yeah,
Don't stop
that's
asking.
exactly it. And there is absolutely no shame in asking for support when doing something like this. You've never, if it's your first baby or babies, obviously you've had multiple babies, you don't know what you're doing. It's brand new, obviously practicing. You can do a lot of reading, which is amazing, but when it comes and you're actually doing the real life breastfeeding, it's different and it's harder. So it's being able to access that support. So what we will do on our email that we share after this as well, our follow-up email, there will be a link on there so that you can access support. There's a phone number for the the NCT helpline that Fran mentioned. So for any sort of specific questions that are coming in, you can absolutely get that support from these amazing supportive people that are here to be able to help you. And in fact, I'm not surprised. I knew we'd get lots of amazing questions in today, and I'm going to try and get through as many as we can before the end of the event. But if we find that we haven't answered them all, please do reach out to the places that we're advising you to, or contact us directly on our Mamas and Papas Instagram, because we can then go to Fran and Cheryl and Chantel and get those questions answered for you. So you're not on your own. Please do continue to ask. We are here for you. So yeah, I'm going to go straight into our Q&A and start asking some questions. So we mentioned about a clicking noise. I've had somebody mention and say their baby makes a clicking noise when she's feeding. Usually it stops after a while. Could it be due to the milk coming in too fast, or has she not quite got the suction quite right? They're 3 weeks into feeding. Nipples were a little bit sore to start, but are now starting to feel much better. So who is my best advisor to answer this question? Cheryl, I think you mentioned, didn't you, around some clicking?
Yeah,
so did you want to talk about clicking?
Absolutely. So it is usually, like you were saying, if the clicking noise goes after a little while, it's probably taking your baby a little bit of time to get a good latch and a good position. So I would just, if you're 3 weeks in now, so the best person to speak to if you wanted some face-to-face support would be your health visitor, or would be someone like Fran, a breastfeeding support worker, to come in with you and just observe a feed. So I would recommend someone who's trained just to observe the whole feed, but again it would just probably be a few tweaks on that positioning and attachment to make sure that baby's got a deep enough latch, and you shouldn't hear the clicking noises. But if it is, say, for the first 10 seconds, like we were saying, that kind of toe curling period, and making sure that baby's got that deep latch, then that, I would say that's okay, as long as the feed is comfortable for you after that point, and that there's no noises after that kind of 10 to 15 seconds and it all settles down. But if you're still concerned, then get a professional to observe the feed and just give you some extra tweaks with your positioning and attachment.
Oh, thank you, Cheryl. I think that's really, really helpful. So if there are any further questions for the lady that asked that, please do contact us afterwards, and we can obviously support or try and point you in the right direction. So we've talked a lot about mums today. Just, naturally, that's the positioning that we can go forward for the mums. But, obviously from a dad's point of view, it's important for them to feel involved as well. So when we talk about skin to skin, how important is that for a dad to be able to experience skin to skin, or your partner as well, for them to experience skin to skin? So Fran, did you mention skin to skin for us?
I'm happy to talk about. It's really important for your babies will get huge benefit from having skin to skin, whoever they're doing that with. So they're still going to be able to hear heartbeats. They're going to be getting used to the smells of different people and experiencing that calmness and oxytocin rush from whoever is cuddling that baby. So yes, skin to skin is absolutely recommended for both parents to do with their new baby.
Can I add into that?
Go for it.
I just want to add in and say, obviously, I breastfed my 3 children. My husband's actually never, ever give the girls a bottle, ever. And I know that it's quite a big thing. Like, a lot of women come to me and say, oh, I think we're going to combi feed so my husband can have that bonding. But my husband and my children have the most amazing bond. And like I said, he's never, ever given them a bottle. He would do loads of skin to skin. I used to say, I'll do boob, you do bum. I got a great deal. So I'd wake him up in the middle of the night and say, they've done a poo, so he would do their nappy. But he's never ever felt a lack of bonding through me breastfeeding, ever at all. And I said to you girls the other day, I don't know if you've seen it, there's The Rock, and it was saying there's more than one way to support a breastfeeding mum, and it was a picture of The Rock, and he was feeding his wife, breastfeeding their baby, and then there was a picture of him doing skin to skin. So I just don't feel like there's so many other roles men can do and still have that bonding as well and be involved in helping.
Well, I think you're totally right. And when we're talking about that, obviously, like Cheryl and Fran mentioned, your baby could feed for 10 minutes, they could feed for 50 minutes. And my little boy was really, really hungry. I was quite overdue when I had him, and he just wanted to feed for a long time in a row. So I would sit and I'd think, oh, I've not got a bottle of water. And I know it's going to be difficult if your partner goes back to work after a period of time, and that'll help you get into that routine. But my husband was absolutely brilliant at getting me a bite to eat or getting me a drink so that I could sit and feed for longer and be comfortable. And actually that leads us nicely onto another question around foods to increase milk supply and any foods to avoid. So I'm welcome to open that question up to all three of you really. Are there any specific foods that you would recommend to increase your milk supply?
There's limited evidence about some foods supporting milk supply. So things like oats or fennel or fenugreek seeds. As I say, there's limited evidence that these might work, but you can make some yummy things and it's not going to hurt, is it? So there are some things that we're meant to avoid during breastfeeding. Mostly it's just eat a normal, healthy, balanced diet. Your baby will take everything that they need. They'll get what they need no matter what you're eating. Things like shark and marlin are not recommended during pregnancy. I don't know if they're a normal part of your normal diet in the UK, not well known foods. Caffeine, the evidence is that it's the same as during pregnancy, that you should stick to those same limits during pregnancy.
But it's good to keep drinking lots of water, keep hydrated.
Well, it makes you really thirsty. Breastfeeding, you having a drink of water next to you or a cup of tea, really, really you'll want it, because particularly when the weather's as hot as it has been recently, you'll be very, very thirsty.
Yes, my health visitor. Oh, sorry. No, I was going to say, my health visitor, when I was breastfeeding the twins, she just said to me, always make sure before you start to feed, just have a pint of water, so then you're kind of constantly, replacing that. And then also I found, obviously this isn't the same for every baby, but I found if I had onions, they would be really gassy, and I found the girls would be a bit more irritated. And also one of my pregnancy cravings was Coca-Cola, and it continued. Then I was like a bit addicted, and then it continued when I was breastfeeding, but when I would drink it, it just didn't agree with the girls at all. So I did have to definitely, I don't remember if Dakota, my eldest, but with the twins, there was loads of different things I had to find that just didn't agree with their tummies.
And it's interesting because although that's what we hear from lots of women, anecdotal stories like that, there isn't actually a bank of evidence that says avoid this or don't that. So you kind of almost, I say suck it and see, and then it feels a little bit inappropriate when I'm talking about breastfeeding, but you know what I mean.
We know what you mean. No, thank you, Fran, that's really good. And I've got somebody here asking, does having a C-section affect milk supply?
Sorry. When I had the twins, I actually had one naturally, with forceps, vaginally with forceps, and then I actually ended up having an emergency C-section as well. So there's so many different things, obviously, fighting up against it. I had like a traumatic birth, and I was still successfully able to breastfeed. And if someone is having a planned C-section, something that I would recommend, that I wish I had done, but obviously my birth just come on naturally early itself. If you have a planned C-section, then speak to your midwife about colostrum harvesting. I really, really wish that I'd have done that, because my twins had a low blood sugar, which is obviously quite common in premature births and can be if you have a C-section. But if you have something planned, then you can get some syringes. I think your midwife should be able to supply them to you, but if she can't, for whatever reason, you can get them on like Amazon, just 1 ml, and you literally just hand express like Cheryl showed us, and literally just syringe off some milk, and it would have just started our journey easier. But I didn't have that, and I was still able to have a successful breastfeeding journey after a traumatic birth and emergency C-section.
Oh no, that's amazing. I think that's really good to know, because you can plan for your labour, but you truly never know how it's going to go. So being able to know that you can still do it depending on your circumstances and the labour that you have, that's amazing. Thank you. And I've got one here. Oh, it's just jumped up. So during a feed, do you feed from both breasts? So Cheryl, would you like to go for that one?
Yeah, sure. So you always start obviously on one side, and then we would always say to offer the other breast. Sometimes the baby wants the other side as well, sometimes they won't. And we always just say go back to the breast that you fed least from. So some people in the early days find like a bracelet helps remind them, but usually you can just feel, which one feels a bit fuller, remember from last time. So yeah, definitely offer both breasts, but sometimes, like we were saying earlier, breastfeeding is a drink, a snack, a breakfast, lunch and dinner. Sometimes they're going to want one, sometimes they're going to want two, and always go back to the fullest one afterwards, so that you're equally stimulating your milk supply on both sides.
That's really good to know. I'm conscious that it's 11 o'clock now, but we've still got a few questions that I'd like to run through. If everybody's okay staying on for another 5 minutes, we'll go through these. So one for you, Cheryl. I'm scared I'm holding my baby too close to me when I'm breastfeeding. Will they still be able to breathe?
Absolutely. So the shape of the baby's nose is actually designed to help with that, and what the position that you have will really help. So if you're bringing in baby asymmetrically, so that chin is hitting your breast first, you've got a big wide open mouth and getting that latch on, you should notice, let me get my dough, when they're latched on, you should notice a nice gap between the breast and the nose if you've got them positioned correctly. So you want that baby nice and close to you, doesn't matter. So in this hot weather, just make sure that they're, just got a nappy on, it'll be fine because they'll get some heat from you. And just make sure that they've got that nice indented chin into your breast, and then they're naturally going to have that gap between the nose and the breast, which means they're going to breathe absolutely fine.
No, I think that's really good to know as well. And I've got another one here, but this is directed to you, Fran, for NCT, but I think it's a very relevant question for all of us. I feel uncomfortable or anxious breastfeeding in public. Do you have any tips to ease this? And I remember when this was me, I felt exactly that way. And I'm quite a confident person, but I definitely felt a little bit shy and a little bit nervous at first. And it took a little while for me to overcome that. I think that was more about how I felt about it than anybody else around me. But does anybody have any tips they can share?
I think it can take time, can't it, to feel confident in feeding, and certainly in the really early days you might feel like you've got a lot of breast and stomach and arms and legs everywhere while you're starting to get into the swing of things. But actually what lots of women find is once they know what they're doing, actually you can feed very surreptitiously when you're out and about, and no one will even notice that you're doing it. Some things that women find helpful to feel a little bit more confident might be having scarves with you, probably not what you want at the moment, but they can be quite helpful in sort of draping them in appropriate places. And other women talk about wearing like a vest top underneath a bigger top, so that you can pull a vest top down so that your tummy is still covered, and the looser top up, so that way it minimises the amount of skin that feels like it's on show. I don't know if anybody else has got any other tips you've heard or tried.
I used to do that.
Yeah, and shirts I always found really just anything with buttons, so that you could just unbutton and then you've got easy access to one side. And I would just reassure you that obviously when you're attaching baby you can see everything, but when you're actually a bystander or someone observing someone breastfeeding, you could actually not see very much. And I think it's just giving yourself time to get through building up your confidence. So there's no rush in those early weeks. Spend that time at home establishing breastfeeding, making sure you don't overwhelm yourself with visitors, so that you've got that time and space just to sit in front of Netflix on the sofa with no top on, and you've really got that time to do all those breastfeeding lessons, those driving lessons, and kind of crack it really. And then venture out to your park or your cafe, and then try and do your breastfeeding when you built up your confidence a bit. That would be my best advice, is just to spend as much time as possible in those early few weeks just with you know, yourself at home, and then venture out when you feel confident. But majority of the time no one can see anything, and no one I never ever had anyone say anything but nice things to me when I breastfed out in public. It was always yeah, it was always like, oh, that's amazing, I think what you're doing is amazing, you know, wish we saw more of that. So and you know, not your breasts obviously, but you know, because you are generally covered. Do you know, one thing I did see on the internet, what I could say is really funny, is that someone had a hat on their baby, and it had
I've seen that, yeah.
And I just think it's brilliant. It was just made me crack up. But you know, people hardly see anything, so please don't worry. Just get that easy access clothing, and then you'll get, you know, won't be so stressed when you're out. So something with buttons or that's designed for breastfeeding would be my top advice.
Oh, absolutely brilliant tips. I think you don't know how you're going to feel about it until you're doing it. And the vest top trick, that was one of mine as well. So a top on the top and a vest underneath, and that worked. And I had a baby in the summer, and it was a very hot summer, and I still managed to get away with that one. So good tips. Thanks, ladies. So I've got 2 more questions I'd love to get through before we finish today. So do I need to birth my baby after breastfeeding?
I would do to start with, until you get to know your baby. And you might find that you can just pick them up after a feed, and that will be all they need. And you might hear a very audible belch, or you might just notice your baby relax a little bit. There's lots of tips and tricks for, you know, patting them on the shoulder or holding them on your arm. But certainly some babies are more burpy than others. But until you get to know your baby, I would encourage you to birth them after every feed.
And that's a nice opportunity to cuddle them afterwards as well. Have that cuddle, nice little snuggle afterwards. Oh, that's
well, and they throw up down your back, of course, which is,
and that too. Yeah, that's not the best bit. Not my was the best. To be fair, and sometimes you don't even know about it, especially at the very beginning. If it's not just a little amount, just down the back of your top, especially if you're in a black
Always
top.
put the big giant muslin over your shoulder before you do that one.
Definitely. Now that's a good tip. That's definitely one to take away from today. So my last question I've got here: during your pregnancy, if you do not leak from your breast, does this mean you will be unable to breastfeed?
No, it doesn't make any difference at all. Some women are acutely aware of colostrum, others never see it.
Yeah, with when I was pregnant with my eldest, honestly, I used to send pictures to my friends because my tops was just ruined. I leaked so much milk, and then when I was pregnant with the twins, obviously I had double, so you'd think that I'd have all this milk, and I was prepared for it. I bought breast pads when I didn't need them yet, just because I thought I'm going to have like this milk everywhere, and I didn't leak once throughout my whole pregnancy.
I think everybody's body is just so different, isn't it? Aren't they? You know, I wanted to breastfeed, but I didn't have any signs at all from me that until I had my baby and I started to produce my milk. So yeah, I think that's a really nice reassurance there. But I think we've got through as many questions as we possibly could. I am absolutely delighted to have had all 3 of you here with us today, sharing your experiences, your knowledge, your wisdom. I think this has been really, really useful for everybody. So thank you so much for your time. That brings me to say thank you to everybody for watching today. I hope it's been useful for you. I hope you've gained lots of great useful tips and advice. But as we said, if there's anything that you want further information on, or you'd like further clarity on, we will send a follow-up email after this where we point you in the direction of Fran, Chantel and Cheryl, and also the NCT feeding line so that you can ask those questions. But as I said, we're always available on social media. Please do ask us at Mamas and Papas on a direct message, and we can always get that question asked for you. So on the follow-up email, we would absolutely love to get people's feedback, because we're hoping to do lots more of these events with really useful topics, and we'd love to know what worked well for you or what you'd like us to change next time. And if there's something that you would like to know about one of our products, there is also a link on there to access our online personal shopping service. So that just leaves me to say thank you very much to everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. So thanks, and enjoy your Sunday.
Bye.
Bye.